Welcome to the White Pill Podcast. My name is Maxim Smith, and I want to talk about the black pill. During World War II, when we started to see people being enslaved and killed in such mass numbers that it was stuff that the world had never seen before, and it really defined that period in time. One great book to read is A Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl, and he goes over how terrible those times were and how a lot of the people in the concentration camps were in fact black-pilled at points, and that caused their eventual deaths most of the time. Of course, they were starving, they were super hungry, they were being beaten, and they also saw their friends and family being let off to die, which is a very hard thing to even think about at all. And being imprisoned and then knowing that you could die any day. But the biggest point where Viktor Frankl talked about was how there were times within 48 hours that men would just lay down and die because things got so hard for them, and it wasn't necessarily the physical aspect of things. Of course, they were starving, things were difficult. At points, they're being beaten or threatened to be beaten by guards. But the thing that set them over the edge, and which led to many men's eventual deaths at the concentration camps, was the fact that they gave up. They lost hope. They decided that there wasn't anything to live for anymore, and there was no hope. They didn't know when the war was going to end. They didn't know when things were going to get better. They didn't know if things could get better or how they could, because they had reached such a low point. They've realized that there's such evil in the world, and before then they had no idea how much evil could be put into one thing, put into killing millions of people, to enslaving them as well, and to having them watch each other be let off to die. That's very, very difficult for people to see. And it's crazy. If you put yourself in that position, you would think, oh, I would probably give up hope too, because I wouldn't know when the war would end. I wouldn't know if I would ever see my family again. I don't know if we would ever be saved or liberated. I wouldn't know. But the reason why Victor thinks he made it out without laying down and dying within 48 hours was because he didn't lose hope. And he knew that there was always a way that you could actually try to get something done, that you could get out, that you could escape, you could be free, or that maybe the army would just come along one day, the American army would come along one day and liberate you. You didn't know, but it's better to have that hope than to give up all hope and lay down and die. It's just not the right thing to do. Sadly, that's what happened to many of these people at the concentration camps. They would lay down in their little places they were given. They weren't even houses. They were like bunks they were given. So they would lay down in their bunk, and they wouldn't get up when they were told to by the guards. They would just lay there, and they would die because they gave up hope. They would die because they gave up hope. They got depressed, and they just laid down and died. And that's what being black-pilled is, really. Being black-pilled is thinking there's no hope, there's no reason to keep going, there's no reason to try to fight back against any evil in the world. We should just roll over, lay down, and die. Because what's the point of doing anything? That's their mentality. The people that are black-pilled believe that we can't do anything at this point. We might as well just give up, there's no hope. And that's definitely not the right thing to that's definitely not the right way to view things. When you look at the people who survived going into Auschwitz, for example, the people who survived that did not give up hope. And they, like Viktor Frankl, would think of family members. Viktor Frankl thought of his wife. One day he was just sitting down and he was thinking about his wife, and he was thinking about how he would love to see her one day, and he hoped he would see her again. He hoped. He didn't give up hope. And eventually he made it out. He was freed. So he got to go back home. But the people who gave up hope laid down, and within 48 hours, they died. And this is one amazing quote from his book. Those who have any why to live can bear almost any how. No matter how tough things get, if you have a why to live, if you have a reason to live, you can keep going, no matter what. There's very, very few circumstances in which someone with a why to live may give up. Of course, there may be times where maybe something happened to your kids and it got really, really bad. Maybe your kids died, and then you're just like, man, I have no reason to live at this point. But most of the time, you can keep going if you have a why to live. If you don't have a why to live, it's going to be very difficult. And if you don't have a why to live right now, try searching for it. And you're never going to stop searching for your why to live. It's always going to be adding on to something. You're going to go on one track, and then you're going to find another that you want to pursue. And you're going to try to search for meaning. That's why it's called a man's search for meaning or a woman's search for meaning. It's about finding your meaning in life, why you are here, what you're here to do, and what you want to do in your life. That's what you have to figure out. Another great quote from him is, when we can no longer change a situation, we are challenged to change ourselves. And I know things are tough right now. People have suffered this year for sure. But if you compare it to previous events in the world, then 2020 or even the beginning of 2021 are really nothing compared to some of the terrible events in the world. Look at World War One, World War Two, or how about Vietnam? I think a lot of people could relate to Vietnam. Perhaps your parents, your grandparents, or your great grandparents were in Vietnam or World War Two. They saw terrible things that hopefully we will never see. The chances of us seeing it are relatively likely, but I'd rather not see any of the stuff that my grandparents saw during Vietnam. My grandpa was in Vietnam. He doesn't talk about it very much. I don't think it's because he doesn't want to. I just think he doesn't think about it very much. But the stuff he saw there, even if he was not going out into front lines very much, still very, very bad. You still had to see people suffering. You still had to see your friends suffering. And if one of your friends died, you had to go back and tell their family, hey, look, John died. I'm very, very sorry. And you had to tell them that. I mean, these people suffered so much more than we have in 2020 alone. And I know people have suffered to varying degrees in 2020. And I've seen really terrible stuff where, because you can't allow many people to go into hospitals because of COVID, people will have their mother or father dying and they can't go in and say goodbye to them. And that's really terrible. That is very, very terrible for that not to happen. I mean, in 2020, my grandfather died, and the good thing was that the funeral home actually said, okay, fine, we'll allow you to have as many people as you want, which before that, I think it was max 20 people, which, unless you have a very small family, that's not going to be enough. You need to have a lot more people there. And plus, my grandfather had a lot of friends. He made a lot of friends with people. He was on swim teams. He was on all this stuff. He was a very good, hardworking man. And he was a good man. He was truly a good man. And it's hard to find good men like that in the world. It's hard to even try to define many people as good men. To reach the level of being a good man is not it's not easy at all. But there's these restrictions that make life harder than it should be for people. So I'm glad the funeral home actually allowed, I mean, tons and tons of his friends, family to go and be there. That's great. But for people who don't have these abilities to get around the restrictions, it's very, very difficult for them, especially if you have a family member die. Because one family member dying doesn't just impact you, but it impacts everyone around you. It impacts people that you don't even know. Maybe it's friends of theirs that you didn't know before. it impacts so many people. But there's a lot of terrible circumstances in life. And the amount of terrible events that happened in 2020 are so many that I can't even remember. I remember, these riots over the summer. I remember people going against the people that were rioting and getting knocked out, getting kicked in the head, falling over and getting knocked out, falling over, cracking their head open. A lot of terrible, terrible events. People trying to defend their self, defend their business, and then having terrible things happen to them, having their businesses burned down. There's countless terrible events that happened in 2020. And there's events that happened that we all saw, but there's also events that only you experienced that I don't even know about. There's events I experienced that you don't even know about. We all suffered in our own individual ways, and a lot of people are suffering because they can't see their friends. The amount of child suicides there were in 2020 was way more than it should ever be. And it was because, well, many of the suicide notes, I saw story after story of this. The suicide notes to the kids' parents was always, I killed myself because I couldn't see my friends. And this is ages ranging between elementary to high school levels. That's kids doing this. It's really, really terrible. So you look at that, right? The amount of terrible events that happened, and there were many, many terrible events. But there's always something you can do about it. You have to realize that. Don't go, oh, there's so much going on, I'm just going to give up. I'm just going to sit down. Go, there's a lot going on. Let me see what I can focus on. Let me see what I can do. Maybe I could help here. Maybe I could help in my community. Maybe I can try to fundraise some money for small businesses in my community. Maybe I could organize some smaller events in my community so that the kids can get opportunities to actually hang out with each other, to play with each other, to make sure that they don't get depressed. There's always something you can do. And you have to remember that. There's always something you can do no matter what. No matter how bad the circumstances are, there's always something you can do. You think about, once again, your grandparents, your great-grandparents, Vietnam, World War II. You look at that and you realize how terrible the events were, and how sometimes they could have been in situations where there was almost seemingly no way out, and that they were almost guaranteed to die because they were surrounded by enemy forces, because maybe they were surrounded by enemy forces and they had to give up their life and call in an airstrike on themselves to basically kill all the enemies around them so that their buddies could survive. There's a lot of terrible things that happened, but there's always something they could do. Whether it's rushing the enemy, or whether it's trying to evacuate their friends, there's always something they try to do. Because those generations, which were much stronger, realized that they have the ability to do something. And no matter how bad things get, you can do something about it. You can always do something about terrible situations. And if you think you can't, you're probably wrong. You need to look at it and go, well, there's bad things going on, but I could probably do something about this. My grandfather just died. Let me see how I can make this situation better. As Jordan Peterson talks about, it's about maybe a family member dies. You want to be the person there that can hold everyone together. Now, maybe that might not seem like the biggest thing ever. Maybe it's not a heroic act, but it's certainly a good thing to do, at very least. Even when the world seems terrible, when a family member dies, or there's tons of terrible events in the world, there's always something you can do to make it better. Or to make it better, maybe not just for yourself, but better for other people. And that's very good to do, to make things better in the world for other people. Starting off with family members, then go out from there. Try to make the world better for your friends, or maybe for strangers that you don't even know. Right? The Barstool Sports Fund to small businesses. I don't know these people, and the people that are donating don't know those people, but they're still willing to help these small businesses that are struggling. Because there's always something you can do about a terrible situation. Another quote from A Man's Search for Meaning. Everything can be taken from a man, but one thing, the last of human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given circumstances, to choose one's way out. To choose one's way. You can always choose how you're going to act and what you're going to do. I can't decide what you're going to do, but there's always something you can do. Things are going to be terrible, things are going to be rough. Your grandparents or great grandparents could have been in concentration camps. They could have been there and starved and seen their family members or friends be led off to the gas chambers to die and then be buried in mass graves. I mean, that's crazy to think about. It's insane. And it's terrible. But giving up hope is never the right thing to do. And the black pill is essentially, okay, let me give up hope. Let me completely forget that I could do something about this. Let me not even think about the fact that I could do something about this. Let me give up, roll over, and just die, really, is what it's equivalent to. Because you're giving up yourself at that point. You're giving up yourself. And you're not willing to do something about something that you can absolutely change. You can absolutely change the circumstances around you. The situation around you can be changed by you. And please remember that. And that's why this podcast is called the White Pill Podcast. It's saying, yes, there's terrible things going on. Yes, there were riots over the summer. Yes, there's people not being able to see their family members dying because of the COVID restrictions. Yes, there's kids getting depressed and sometimes killing themselves because they are depressed and they can't see their friends. Yes, there's so much going on, but there's something I can do about it, and I'm not willing to give up, and I'm willing to do my best and try hard to make sure I do right. I mean, that is ultimate power for a human. Really. Most people think of power as, oh, someone ruling over me, but if you want to think about individual power, it's the ability to recognize the circumstances and how terrible things may be and realize I can do something about this and I'm willing to do something about this and I'm willing to die on my feet rather than live on my knees. That's the right thing to do. And that's what should be the motivating factor for many people. Of course, you're going to have your own motivating factor. Maybe it's friends or family, or maybe it's pursuing an idea or a goal in your life. Either one of those is great, as long as it keeps you on your feet instead of on your knees. That's the best thing to do. That's why the black pill hurts people. It hurts people, and it makes people depressed, give up hope, and it makes them believe that there's no right thing to do because there is nothing to do. That's what the black pill says. There's nothing to do. Let me give up hope. Let me pretend as if I'm not able to do anything. Let me feel hurt, but do nothing about it. Instead, choose the white pill. Choose the white pill. That's the right thing to do. There's always something you can do. There's always something you can do. The red pill, it's funny because the red pill is kind of like a mix with the white pill, right? You have to take the red pill to realize the circumstances around you and how terrible things are. And then from there you can go either, I believe, to a white pill or a black pill. And that's, okay, circumstances are bad, but now I will choose to do something about it, and I will recognize that there is always something I can do about it. Or you go the other way and believe, oh, I can not do anything about this. This is too overwhelming. This is terrible. I give up. That's just not the right thing to do. One man that suffered a large amount of terribleness from other people from the world was Alexander Solzhenitsyn. I have not read the Gulag Archipelago series, but he was in the gulags, which is equivalent to concentration camps. He got cancer while in the gulags. In the gulags, you had to go out. They would give you shoes that were too small for you, which would basically destroy your foot. And since they were too small, you would have to kind of walk barefoot most of the time. You're walking barefoot, but you're in Russia. There's snow everywhere, especially during winter. There's snow everywhere, super cold, so your feet get frost bitten and your toes fall off. Things get really, really bad. Then you have to go work on the railroads. You see your buddies fall over and die in the snow because they're starving, they're cold, their hands are freezing, their feet are freezing, their shoes don't fit them, they don't have much clothes. I mean, it's unbelievable because it's hard for you in your own imagination to put yourself in that position of not only having cancer while being in the gulags, but also having to see your family or friends die, having to work in the snow, getting frostbite. It's just terrible. And being treated poorly because of it. Right? The kulaks, which were a relatively successful group of farmers in Russia at the time, were all called oppressors by the government just because they were producing most of the country's food, which is a word that we see a lot nowadays, oppressor. We see that a lot. We see people being called oppressed or oppressor. It's insane. And this is why it's a very dangerous word to use because the government did the same thing. And whenever the government wants to use words like that against the people, they generally don't have good things in plan for the people. And so far, we haven't seen many people in government saying that. We've seen more leftist types saying that. But I wouldn't be surprised if with Biden we would start seeing those words come out of people in the government's mouths. But the kulaks were led to the gulags, and they would try to put up a fight most of the time. But the one thing that would happen is that the government would convince the people that there was actually that they were oppressors, that the kulaks were oppressors, and they would convince other people of this so that people would turn against their own neighbors and go round them up and say, "Here you go. We're gonna bring you to the gulag." And whenever the kulaks did try to defend themselves, they would fail most of the time just because of overwhelming force. And it's sad because they were just trying to defend themselves. It's like, imagine being called an oppressor, then having the full force of the government and the people come after you when you're just trying to farm and you're feeding everyone in the country. That's like, what the heck, man? I'm trying to do good, then now you're trying to kill me at this point? What the heck? But that's the kind of words we see. And that's how much people have suffered throughout history. And that's not even a glimpse of how much people have suffered throughout history. That's like a small, I mean, tiny portion of it. It's so small, it's incredible in the full sense of everything. But when they were led to the gulags, they were pretty much all killed, and a lot of them suffered because of the conditions like I described earlier, where they had to suffer so much just because of the words that they were labeled. They were labeled as terrible things. And then what happened after that, after they were all killed or put into gulags and maybe some of them survived, the rest of the country starved because nobody was producing food. Like, what the heck? That makes so little sense. But that's the government for you, by the way. It's okay, let's kill the people producing food, even though we want the rest of the people to be happy. It doesn't make any sense. They want the general population to actually believe that they're here to help. And for a while, the Russian government did convince these people, the citizens, that this was true. But over time, it kind of didn't work out so well, especially when people started to realize maybe these people in government don't have the best ideas in mind for us, which is certainly true. If you want to think anyone in government has the best ideas in mind for you, you're probably mistaken. Unless you have some great actual good person in government that is trying to make things better. But it's rare that having a government in place itself, usually doesn't make things better in the first place. But the point is that people have suffered. I mean, crazy amounts of really, really bad, not even bad, it's beyond that, evil things that have happened to them by other people who generally think that they have authority over you and that they decide what's best for you, such as people in government. And because of that, there were many people who recognized the circumstances around them and didn't give up hope because there's always something you can do. There's always one way you can help, whether that's helping yourself try to be better or helping someone else get out of a bad situation. You can always help. You can always help, no matter what, no matter how bad the circumstances are, no matter how bad things get. The black pill is not the right way to go. It's not the right thing to choose because it's going to lead you down a very bad path of believing there's nothing you can do and believing that there is no hope and that you're not capable, which is really diminishing to believe, to convince yourself that you're not capable, that you're not able to even put up a fight or even to start thinking of putting up a fight. You're literally convincing yourself with the black pill, if you take it, that there's nothing I can do. Oh, well, might as well give up. I guess I'm just going to roll over because there's nothing I can do. Which, to diminish yourself that much and actually believe something like that, you must be in a very bad place. And in the first place, even before 2020, you must have been in a bad place because that is, it's sad. It's very, very sad. But, that's why you shouldn't take the black pill. My name is Maxim Smith, and this is the White Pill Podcast. I hope you guys enjoyed that. I'm going to try to do this every Monday and Friday because I want to talk about this sort of stuff. I want to give you guys some more sense of hope, and I want to try to put us in the right direction of doing good, doing the right thing to make sure that our kids or grandkids have a better future. In the future, I want to have kids, to have a big family, to live in the mountains somewhere, build my own village, and live happily. That's all I want. And I want to make that happen. So I want to make things better. I want to hopefully inspire people to have more hope and to actually not just talk, but have action to display that you're going to do something by action, not through word. And I hope we can all do that. Once again, thank you to Michael Malice for inspiring the name of this podcast and inspiring a lot of the ideas within this podcast. I just want to let you guys know that if there are times where I say stupid things, which is pretty much guaranteed that there's going to be times where I say stupid things, I'm guaranteed, then please let me know and we'll just talk about it and try to make it less stupid, try to make the ideas more reasonable, sensible, and better over time. But thank you guys for watching, and I will see you guys next time.